This week on Christian World News, living underground because of threats overhead. Ukrainian soldiers are deep inside tunnels, holding the line against Russian forces. Meet the missionary who is helping them stay strong.
Plus, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor wrote a book about her father's experience. When she ordered copies online, she made an awful discovery. Anti-Semitism is stronger than ever.
And the Tesla of suicide machines could be legalized in Britain. It's part of the push to pass the terminally end of life bill. Folks, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. Thanks for joining us. Well, after nearly 3 years of war, Ukraine is exhausted. Daily missile strikes rattle Kyiv as fierce battles rage near the front lines.
In the eastern Donbas region, cities have become a focal point in the grinding of this war of attrition. Our colleague Chuck Holton reports from the front line.
The war has taken a heavy toll on eastern Ukraine. With cities like Kramatorsk under constant threat of attack, civilians are left to decide between escaping or enduring life in a war zone. Our team traveled to the front lines to see what these people are facing.
I want to stay in Ukraine, not in Russia. I don't know why Putin needs this, but we want to live in Ukraine.
I'm not sure what expectations others have, but what I hope for is an end to this conflict. It would be best if we didn't give away any land to them, especially since many of our relatives live there. There is already so much division.
Traveling here has become increasingly dangerous as drones dominate the battlefield. These unmanned aircraft monitor and attack, making movement risky and unpredictable. And we just saw 2 FPV drones. And so we have a jammer on our vehicle, you can see right there. But if those drones are wire-guided and not wireless, we're in big trouble. Let's go.
I've been contacted by the Foreign Legion, which is the Americans who are fighting over here on the behalf of the Ukrainian government. So they contacted me to come out here and do some ministering, do some chaplaincy work with those guys.
This is how the soldiers in the field are living. These underground tunnel systems and bunkers just go for miles along the front line. And you just come down here, let's take a look, and you can see how wet and cold and miserable it is down here. These positions have to be deep underground to withstand the bombardment of artillery. And they spend a lot of time down here with very little to keep them warm, very little to do, just holding the line against the Russian aggression. There are still more than 4,000 members of the International Legion fighting here, and many have been here for years. We visited a group at a Bible study near the front lines, where they spoke openly about the war and how the recent U.S. election might impact Ukraine.
If Trump continues to support Ukraine, great. If he doesn't, we'll find another way. And that's basically it. We can't not. So whatever happens outside of Ukraine is their problem. And we'll deal with the cards we're dealt with on the ground.
We wait from actual help from the people of the United States, not your politics, because they can promise something on elections, but actual situation all over the world is changing every day. So we wait some support and understanding our situation. And I want to ask all people of the United States analyze the situation well, to understand it.
I think on the international volunteer side, we would like to see continued support, although that's not what we expect, at least at the same level. However, a lot of people see Trump as a wild card, so to say. So things could go either way. He could completely pull out all support for Ukraine, and things will get pretty difficult for Ukraine as far as negotiating or even holding the front lines. Or, some people even hope that Trump will actually be tougher on Putin and force him, into a favorable deal down the line. Although we don't expect that this war will end within 24 hours at least. We think it's a little more complicated than that.
As winter continues, the hardships for those near the front lines intensifies. Civilians and soldiers alike face freezing conditions, limited supplies, and unrelenting attacks. Despite these challenges, their hope for an acceptable peace remains.
God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. And so while we're in here, we hear the bombs and drones exploding out there. And whenever I feel that I need to call out to God, I know when I call out to him, we serve a real and a righteous God, and he is a very present help in danger.
From Ukraine, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thanks, Chuck. George, you and I were both in Ukraine when the war first started, and you've been back several times.
Yeah.
Did you ever think 3 years in we'd still be in this war?
Yeah, it's absolutely remarkable. That last quote there, he said, acceptable peace. Ukrainians are not willing to accept land that has already been taken over by the Russians. But the good thing is that in the midst of all this, the church, and we've been documenting how the church continues to grow and people are putting their lives at risk to continue to serve on the front lines. It's absolutely incredible. You and I saw just the brave spirit of the Ukrainians, and they will continue to fight irrespective of what happens today in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, the church there is still just amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well, just a few days ago, the world observed Holocaust Remembrance Day and the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis. It's been 80 years since Allied forces liberated the death camp at Auschwitz.
Melanie Saul, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, published a book about her father's remarkable story. Unfortunately, the experience taught her that anti-Semitism is stronger than ever. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports.
Melanie Saul's father survived the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, where more than 1 million died in its gas chambers. Born and raised in Poland, Moshe Saul was 17 when the Nazis invaded. Growing up in the U.S., Melanie knew her father survived the Holocaust, although he didn't share what happened because he didn't want to burden his children. Melanie eventually interviewed him around age 85, and Moish told her what he remembered. She wrote a book entitled A Daughter of the Holocaust. In it, she writes, "My dad often asks throughout his life, why did I survive and the rest of my family didn't? He has a deep sense of guilt that he lived, and his family members died horrible deaths. Many survivors of the Holocaust have this same sense of guilt."
And this book shares his story, but it also shares his coming to faith in Yeshua at the end of the book.
In 2024, Melanie self-published her work through Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. She ordered 10 copies to be delivered to her son in Manhattan so she could pick them up on a visit to the U.S. Opening the box led to a disturbing surprise.
I was shocked to see vandalism, anti-Semitic vandalism. I flipped through the books because I ordered them to bring back to Israel to give to friends of mine.
What she found was appalling.
Liberate Palestine from the river to the sea. Every single book has something written in Free Palestine. Every one of the 10 books, so they're not useful to me at all.
After Melanie initially contacted Amazon, she was refused assistance, reportedly because the time limit for making complaints and receiving customer service had expired. Then CBN News notified Amazon of the issue, and a spokeswoman sent us this statement. "We have zero tolerance for book defacement and have contacted the author to apologize. We immediately launched an investigation and will take appropriate action based on our findings." Melanie received an apology from Kindle Direct Publishing Executive Customer Relations, which said in part, "First, I want to sincerely apologize, both for your incredibly troubling experience and the difficulties you've had thus far in reporting the issue to Amazon. We have escalated this issue to the highest levels of our organization, as we have zero tolerance for this kind of book defacement." She then reached out to the American Center for Law and Justice for help.
ACLJ, as soon as we saw the situation, immediately assigned lawyers who are experts in this area, did research to find out the relevant law, because there's federal law, there's state law, and put together a memo internally, and then put a demand out to Amazon, a legal letter to Amazon, to the general counsel, and he responded the very same day.
ACLJ lawyer Jeff Balaban says Amazon expressed concern about the issue and is looking into it.
We asked that they replace the books, and they're going to replace the books. Indeed, I believe they said they're replacing multiple copies of the book, so we'll wait and see that happens.
ACLJ also demanded an investigation.
Whoever did this presumably knows her family's address, because that's where the books were sent. And this could be a very dangerous person. It's certainly an unhinged person who hates Jews. And so it's very important that they investigate and discover who it is and give us satisfaction so that the client knows that she and her family are not threatened by this individual.
Balaban says ACLJ is seeking legal repercussions.
Amazon has already said they have zero tolerance for what they call book defacement. And this goes well beyond, this was defacement of books, but well beyond book defacement. I mean, this is clearly an act of hate, an act of anti-Semitism. So, yes, that person should be removed from their job.
So far, Melanie has received her money back, as well as the promise of more books. Melanie says her father would have been shocked and saddened by the defacement of the books.
Someone once pointed out to me that we're going through Holocaust 2.0, where there's anti-Semitic acts all over the world, there's anti-Semitic acts here. It would have just brought back the horrors that he went through the first time.
The most famous resolution or mantra or statement or idea to come out of the Holocaust was never again. But we're living in a time where we are seeing that never again is now.
Balaban says the desecration of Melanie's book is a small but powerful example of what's happening to the Jewish people in the U.S. and around the world.
The same hostile, evil energy seems to be alive in the world again. And the truth is, we know this, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, it never goes away, and it can't be stopped. The problem is when it's all of a sudden, it's become open season. And the worst part of this is that what made it open season was the horrors of October 7th and the horrors of the atrocities. And all of a sudden, it's like this evil woke up in the world and said, oh, we can do this again? Let's go out and kill the Jews.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Wow. Thanks, Julie. Coming up, we take you to Britain, where Parliament is considering a controversial bill to allow some terminally ill people to end their lives. Opponents warn it opens a dangerous door.
Welcome back to Christian World News. In the United Kingdom, one researcher predicts God is making a comeback. A new survey shows Gen Zs are more likely to identify as spiritual than their parents or grandparents. In fact, among the 18 to 24-year-olds, 62% said they are very or fairly spiritual. That compares to 52% of those aged 35 to 44, and just 36% of those aged 55 to 64. Author Christopher Gayson commissioned the poll of 10,000 people. He also noted that many young people are put off by established religion.
Very interesting. Well, assisted suicide could soon be legal in England and Wales. The British Parliament considering a bill that would allow some terminally ill patients to end their lives. Opponents warn it will open the door to abuses. Dale Hurd has this report from London.
The terminally ill end-of-life bill would allow mentally competent adults with 6 months or less to live the right to end their lives with medical help. After the House of Commons voted to advance it to parliamentary committee, a fresh debate ignited here over doctor-assisted suicide, which is currently illegal. Supporters of the bill say it will be subject to strict guidelines. Opponents warn it could be used to pressure the vulnerable, including people with disabilities, into ending their lives. And a right to die could become a duty to die. Backers point to those who suffer unbearable pain or irreversible decline and wish to end their lives with dignity. Parliament member Kim Leadbeater, who introduced the legislation, says accusations it would open the door to abuse are wrong.
The title of the bill is terminally ill adults. It is not disabled people, it is not elderly people, as someone else referenced. The criteria are very, very clear.
Opponents, however, counter that legalized assisted suicide has led to abuse everywhere it's been introduced.
No safeguards on this will ever hold, and it will be almost immediately expanded, as we've seen in Canada and other jurisdictions across the world.
Andrea Williams of Christian Concern also rejects the claim that it is compassionate to help those suffering to end their lives.
It is not kind, it is not caring, it is not compassionate to kill. It is kind and compassionate to care. It is kind and compassionate to provide people with the best pain relief, mental, physical, spiritual help that we can.
Becky Bruno has been battling cancer for 10 years and says she's glad there was no assisted dying law when she suffered from great pain.
At one point, I even said to my husband, just let me die. But that didn't mean let me die, give me an injection so that I die. I was in so much pain that that's how I felt. However, I'm sitting here 2 years later. But if that bill was, say, 2 years ago, and my husband wasn't around, I wouldn't be here today.
Around the world, at least 17 nations allow legal assisted suicide under certain conditions. In the U.S., 10 states and the District of Columbia have some form of assisted suicide, either through legislation or a court ruling. And there have been abuses. In Belgium, Tom Mortier's mother was euthanized in 2012 without the family's knowledge, only because she was said to be incurably depressed.
My mother, who was physically healthy because of her mental problems, received a lethal injection from an oncologist.
Mortier only learned of his mother's death from the hospital the day after she died. Alistair Thompson of the group Care Not Killing, which opposes the bill, warns that British doctors who object to assisted suicide on ethical or religious grounds could lose their jobs.
Potentially they could be struck off. So they could be reported to the General Medical Council and would face disciplinary action.
Thompson told us the new law could even legalize the sarco-suicide pod in Britain. What some call the Tesla of suicide machines was recently used in a suicide in Switzerland. Its inventor claims it allows a person to end their life with just the push of a button.
The legislation is so badly written that it talks about drugs or other substances. So it holds open the door actually for use of the sarcopod, the personalised gas chamber.
While one poll shows 3/4 of the British public supporting the assisted dying bill, its passage is by no means assured. After any amendments in committee, the bill must also navigate the House of Lords. If it does pass, some fear that with Britain's already overburdened public health system, the terminally ill could face new pressure to end their lives. Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
Thank you, Dale. Up next, the Nigerian pastor who grew a small Bible study into a global church planting movement. He tells us where the gospel is spreading the most and why.
Welcome back to Christian World News. Reverend William Kamui is founder of Deeper Christian Life Ministry in Lagos, Nigeria. What began as a Bible study with just 15 people is now a church that averages 120,000 people attending weekly, George.
It's a huge church. Well, not only that, but the ministry has gone global with thousands of local churches in 120 nations. I spoke with him on a host of issues ranging from persecution to the growth of the global church. Reverend Kamui, thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin with the challenges that churches today are facing in Nigeria. The Watchdog Group have called it the most dangerous place to be a Christian. Can you tell us how are churches today overcoming these challenges?
Well, by the grace of God, the churches are coping. Yes, there are disturbances and I would say persecution, but that does not stop the operation of the church, the movement of the church, and even the growth of the church. By the grace of God, evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic churches are actually growing. And we're having open-air meetings and crusades and mass gatherings in major cities in Nigeria. And that's not peculiar to my own part of the ministry, but to many churches and many church leaders, and by the grace of God, we are growing. Yes, there is persecution, but that does not stop what the Lord is doing through the church.
Reverend, how can the global church today support those Christians in your country that are suffering?
Number one, by prayer, by having the proper connection and interaction with church leaders and praying for the church in Nigeria and supporting with teaching, with encouragement, so that the church can be resilient and the church can be able to face whatever challenges.
A report from the Lausanne movement noted that Christianity is continuing to shift from Europe and North America to the global South, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Reverend, what explains this shift?
Well, I would say to start with the grace of God and the move of God and the response of the people. In the ministry, for the leadership, we believe that the Bible, I mean most of the churches believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God and is trustworthy and dependable, and we preach as if, with the certainty that this is the word of God, and we make application to the lives of the people, and we show that Christ is the way, the only way to life eternal, and the only way to reconciliation with God. And we preach that intelligently and forcefully and convincingly. And many people see the fact that Christ is the way. And, there is no ideology generally that will contradict that in the minds of the average listener. Because of that, many are getting to know the Lord and coming to the Lord. And when they come to know the Lord, there's discipleship and to be assured of what they have really believed. And that's why the church, I believe, is growing in Africa, Asia, and in the southern part of the globe.
Reverend William Kumuyi, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless. Finally this week, CBN Superbook helped children in Ukraine celebrate the true meaning of Christmas during the holiday season.
The team held 16 Superbook-themed Christmas events with about 900 children attending. Children and guests watched screenings of Superbook along with a lesson about the fulfillment of God's promise in Jesus. Those kids in Ukraine, wow.
Yeah.
They're going through a lot.
They sure
They
are.
need it.
Folks, that is it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.